good morning, everyone, and today we shall uh, continue from where we left yesterday. Yesterday, we were talking about how how Fourier or Feuerbach, yesterday we were talking about how Ludwig Feuerbach actually saw religion as such, especially Christianity, and he is of the view that while modern science have progressed, yet religion has stuck to its roots. It has stuck to its context, and this is something that needs to be understood. That these two things are going to confront each other at some point of time, and this is exactly where Feuerbach would disagree with Hegel, and as we can see, Feuerbach is somebody who started from Hegel's standpoint in terms of the understanding of philosophical issues. Yet he is going to divert into challenging the philosophical foundation of knowledge that is absolute spirit, or this absolute spirit as the absolute consciousness of a human being. So therefore, Feuerbach would opine that man is the subject or object of history, and not necessarily subject or object of the absolute spirit. That is the the diversion point from where Feuerbach would try to argue. Feuerbach would take on the Restoration period and go beyond that, and try to give us a philosophical foundation where he would insist that theology is a bit superfluous, and therefore we need to go beyond theology into the realm of philosophy, and particularly into the realm of anthropology. So therefore, that is why you see what happens here is that Feuerbach is, you can say, is somebody who tries to bring in materialism into the idea of idealism, to bring in the idea of materialism into the whole concept of the spirit, into the whole concept of idealism, or into the whole concept of theology itself. So therefore, in the words of John Taus, who point out that the true content of Hegelian metaphysics of self-conscious absolute spirit was affirmed as self-conscious of human species being or human essence. So therefore, man was authentic and a real subject of history, rather than man being the authentic and real subject of the absolute spirit. So therefore, what Feuerbach in his critique of religion therefore tried and succeeded to do was to give a human-based discussion to Hegel's philosophy, or to Hegel's to Hegel's paradigm of basing religion, or basing the idea of absolute spirit in forming human knowledge. Okay, so while Feuerbach himself considers Hegel as a natural philosopher in the domain of the mind, and according to him, so therefore natural philosopher cannot work or think without the instruments or without material means, which means that even therefore Hegel had to accept that there is the questions of existence, there are the questions of the environment in which man lives, and therefore even if we try to reach to go into the idea of the absolute spirit, or to listen to gain knowledge from the absolute spirit or from God Himself, yet we are largely influenced by our environment. So, therefore, Feuerbach is somebody who accepts the outer existence of things. The outer existence of things, which means beyond myself, there are so many other things that exist around me, or beyond the absolute spirit, or beyond the idea of God. God has created human being. He has created the environment. He has created the universe. So therefore, these universe, they will behave independently. They will behave independently. So therefore, Feuerbach points out that he says, I quote, "I have many things outside myself which I cannot convey, either in my pocket or in my head." Which means to say that there are so many things that are influencing my ability to think, my knowledge, my foundational philosophy or ideology, that I cannot I cannot convey either in my pocket or in my head. I cannot exactly say that in my pocket I have this kind of thought, or I have this kind of ideas, or in my head that definitely when I go out, something which I have imagined will definitely happen. So he therefore tried to discover a material philosophy, and he keeps himself therefore in the direction opposite to the Hegelian philosophy, because Hegel believed that whatever we do, ultimately the ultimate knowledge is controlled, manifested through the absolute spirit, which means through God, where we may try to reach. So therefore, for Hegel, the idea of perfection is nothing but the idea of perfection is actually to reach to the level of the absolute knowledge. And therefore, that absolute knowledge, the source of that absolute knowledge is actually the absolute spirit or God Himself. So therefore, for Ludwig Feuerbach, is critical about historical form of religion and regards it as anti-human and anti-natural. For him, religion is the understanding of the inner nature of man. That is why Feuerbach says that while the Bible tells us that God created man in His own image, yet the inner nature of man, or natural inner interest of man, is to create God in our own image. There is nothing that is supernatural. That is what Feuerbach is saying. There is nothing that is supernatural. Everything that we imagine, everything that we think or conceive as supernatural are actually the inner nature of man, or it comes out from our inner nature. So therefore, in the preface to the Essence of Christianity, in the preface to, sorry, actually my child was crying. So therefore, as I said, in the Essence of Christianity, Feuerbach regards philosophy in its principle and not necessarily the substance, not the absolute, ego of, like Kant would say in his, critique of pure reason, or other people would say, the absolute identity and so on and so forth. Not even the absolute mind, like Hegel would say. So therefore, what Feuerbach is more interested is that he does not accept anything which is abstract. Unlike Hegel and even Kant, who talk about the inner ego of man, fichte, and then the absolute identity, like Schelling talked about, the substance, like Spinoza talk about. For him, you see, what is important is that something which is abstract, something which is that cannot be explained, is not necessary at all, because he believed in the that things can be explained through the material historical approach. So therefore, so therefore, uh, something that is abstract, or something that is merely conceptual, cannot be the source of knowledge. So therefore, for him, if we talk about real religion, we have to talk about the real world. For him, therefore, our thoughts is generated from the opposite of thoughts. Our thoughts generate from the opposite of thoughts, and from matter, therefore, and from existence, and therefore the senses which have direct relation to the object. Which, rather to say, that if we are thinking about something, if we are imagining about something, it is primarily because there is matter in this world. There is this laptop through which I am able to convince my thoughts to you. There is the chair upon which I am sitting comfortably, and therefore I am able to share my ideas with you. Therefore, these are actual matters, not necessarily which something that you would imagine existing in my head. It doesn't work like that for Feuerbach. Therefore, for Feuerbach, what is important is that our thought is generated from matter, from our existence. The very fact that we exist, the very fact that something exists, that is the source of thought, that is the source of knowledge. Suppose now we have never seen cars moving, then we cannot imagine, we may not be able to, imagine that something can move. You know, if the temperature is not hot or not cold, we may not necessarily have the sense of feeling, the sense of feeling whether it is hot or it is cold. So in this way, therefore, this has direct relation to objects. So Feuerbach, he denied not necessarily religion, but the traditional or the historical form of religion. He never denies the importance of true religion. In fact, at the beginning of the essence of Christianity, he regards religion as the unique quality of man which differs men from the brute. So he says that what the most important role of religion is that religion helps us to identify who is human and who is just crude creature, which means human are those people who are able to think, those people who are able to feel, those people who are able to therefore act in the true feeling of humanity. While if there was no religion, everybody would have been brute. Brute means we would have been doing whatever we want without the ability to think, without the ability to feel, without compassion, without sympathy, without solidarity, without the whole concept of humanism itself. So therefore, as I said, religion is the unique. Religion helps us to bring out a unique quality as human being. For him, I quote. Religion has its basis in the essential difference between man and the brute, and the brutes have no religion. This is what he said in his book, The Essence of Christianity. Religion has its basis in the essential difference between man and the brutes have no religion. Which means that the moment we identify ourselves as human being, We identify ourselves as human being because we have feelings. We we are capable to identify what is good and what is bad. We have a sense of sympathy. We are compassionate. We have a sense of compassion to each other, and we have a sense of solidarity. Brutes, they have no religion because they have no feelings. They don't allow the feelings to overtake their interest. So therefore, religion for Feuerbach is the realization of the inner nature of man. So religion, therefore, is not necessarily about the absolute spirit, but it's about the realization of the inner nature of man, of humanity, of humanism, which means the realization that I have feelings, that I have compassion, that I feel that there is a need for solidarity, a need for sympathy. It is to him, therefore, religion is the self-consciousness of man. Self-consciousness of man. That is why when Feuerbach says that God, when he says that man created God in his own image, he is talking about, therefore, primarily about the brutes who, or the human being who does not consider humanism as a source of their inspiration. So therefore, according to Feuerbach, religion is identical to the consciousness of man about his own nature. So religion, according to Feuerbach, is the realization of our own nature. What is our own nature? The realization that we feel pain if somebody somebody dear to us is being hurt. We feel pain if somebody so close to us simply passed away. We feel emotional about things that is happening around us. So that is the inner nature of man. It is therefore the self-consciousness of man. So therefore, about the self-consciousness about his own nature. So Feuerbach, he points out that religion, I quote, religion being identical with distinctive characteristic of man is then identical with self-consciousness. So if religion is about the identity, the characteristic of man, then it is identical to self-consciousness, with consciousness which man has of his nature, which means identical to his actual nature. So therefore, religion expressed generally, therefore, is a consciousness of the infinite. This is what Feuerbach says is the expression of the consciousness of the infinite, which means of something that is beyond that is beyond the idea of space and time, which is whether you live today or you don't live today, even if your offspring are born and they are going to carry on your legacy, they are going to have the same kind of feeling as long as they are human, because we are not going to give birth to to matters that don't have feelings. We are going to give birth to matters that have feelings, and therefore this is infinite. Thus it is, he says, and can be nothing else than the consciousness which man has in his own, not finite and limited, but infinite nature. So therefore you can say that one important aspect about religion is it has helped us to identify between the true nature and the artificial nature of man, or particularly in the present context, where human being, although they believe in virtues, yet because of the existing market economy, we go against our consciousness to be able to live, to be able to survive, and therefore we compete and we become brutes. And therefore, as somebody says, nothing is permanent except interest. Nothing is permanent except interest. So, therefore, what religion has helped us has helped us to be human being. If there is an important role of religion, it is to help us to be human being. So therefore, according to Feuerbach, the highest form of self-assertion, the form which we can think of as superiority or perfection, or like what Hegel says, or bliss, good, is nothing but consciousness. So I say again that according to Feuerbach, the highest form of self-assertion, therefore the highest form of expressing my religious belief, or expressing that there is something supernatural, or saying that there is perfection, is nothing but consciousness. It is our consciousness. Therefore, thinking of a reason to be limited is our delusion or error, he says. Thinking of a reason to be limited. If we think that, okay, we are human being, therefore we cannot, all source of knowledge comes from the absolute spirit, then it is about limiting ourselves, and this is a delusion or error. So therefore, although he was a student of Hegel, this is where he disagreed with him. So he admits that man, as an individual distinguishes himself from the brutes or the other natural objects because of this, because of his consciousness. So therefore, the man is, in this sense, therefore the man is limited or finite. If on the other side there are human beings which are of infinite, on the other side there are the brutes who are finite, who are limited or have sense of finity, or being finite or having an end. But man can become conscious of his limits and finiteness because he can realize or perceive the perfection or the infinitude of his species, either as an object of feeling, of conscience, or of the thinking of consciousness. So therefore, if human being have to be real human being, then he must realize that his ability is infinite. He needs to have that consciousness, which means consciousness makes him know that there is no limit to possibilities. We talked about possibilities yesterday. So therefore, consciousness is something that makes man infinite, and therefore no limit, and therefore there is no limit for man to even imagine that there is the idea of perfection, and that perfection itself is not limited, which means that there is nothing like perfection. There is nothing like being a perfect human being, because perfection is all about the development of consciousness. So I repeat again, therefore in Feuerbach's idea, such consciousness of man is his infinite nature, and religion for Feuerbach is nothing but the realization of this inner nature of man. And Feuerbach therefore argues that no being can deny its own nature. No being can deny its own true nature. No being is limited, he says, to itself. Every being is in and by itself infinite, has its God, its highest conceivable being in itself, which means everybody is infinite. Everybody has to keep on realizing their own inner nature. As long as they keep trying to realize their own inner nature, they will develop not only that they will get closer to God, but they will also be able to develop themselves from, one epoch of civilization into another epoch of civilization, and therefore we keep on becoming better human being, better society, better relationship with nature, and so on and so forth. So therefore, no being is limited to itself. Every being is in and by itself infinite, and has its God. Being infinite is actually the idea of the existence of God, and it is the highest conceivable being in itself, which means it is the best form of human consciousness, and therefore this best form of human consciousness itself is the existence of God. But if anyone, he says, forgets its true nature and regard himself to be finite or to be limited, and projects his personality to one external or supernatural infinite being, which means he says that there is something he cannot do, he becomes alienated from his own true nature. So how does a human being become alienated from himself? He becomes alienated from himself by believing that there is supernatural power. The very fact that we say that there is supernatural power, or there is somebody that we cannot be, there is something that we cannot do, then that is what he says leads to the limit of his consciousness, and therefore gets himself alienated from his true nature. So, in his book, The Essence of Christianity, Feuerbach therefore tried to develop a religious understanding. He tries to establish the secret of religion is man. He tries to develop that the secret of religion is man. True religion, according to Feuerbach, is the relation of man with himself or with his own nature. So if we are going to believe that there is supernatural being that controls us, that supernatural being is us. It is the relationship of man with himself or with his own nature, with his own environment. Therefore, it is the revelation of man's own intimate thoughts. So if we are going to believe that man has to have a close relationship with God, he has to understand that he has to have a very deep relationship with his own intimate thoughts, with his own inner thoughts, inner feelings. So Feuerbach says that the essence of religion, its latent nature, is the identity of the divine being with the human. The essence of religion, or its latent nature, is the identity of the divine being with human. So therefore, the essence of believing in something, or its latent nature, is the identity of divine being with human, which means it is, if you are talking about something divine, it is about human. It is about human. So you can say that Feuerbach tries to bring this idea that the absolute spirit is not somewhere that we cannot reach, it is within us. Therefore we can reach to our God. And where is our God exists? Within us. How do we get connected to God? By connecting ourselves with our inner thoughts, with our natural being. Okay. So therefore, you see, Feuerbach observed that by his God, thou knowest the man, he says. By his God, thou knowest the man, and by the man, his God, the two are identical. Which means, by his God, by knowing God, you are knowing man, and by knowing man, you are knowing God, and therefore the two are identical. Whatever is God to man that is his heart and soul. Whatever is God to man, which means what is the relationship between God to man, is that is his heart and soul. And conversely, God is the manifested inward nature. God is the manifested inward nature and express self of man, or the express self of man. Religion, the solemn unveiling of man's hidden treasures, the revelation of his intimate thought, the open confession of his love secrets. This is what Feuerbach says. So, if human essence is said to be truly belonging to God, then man becomes alienated from himself. Because if human essence is said to be truly truly belong to God, then he should first of all belong to himself. He should belong to his inner self, not to something that he cannot reach. So therefore, again, according to Feuerbach, if this essence is viewed as truly belonging to God, then man is deprived of it. If he says that God is somewhere else, then therefore man is alienated from himself. So man is separated from himself, and he gets alienated. The richer God, the poorer man. Therefore, if somebody is rich, we tend to regard that as superior human being, and therefore we become poor. And this is exactly how the society has been classed. The class division in society has been the rich and the poor, the have and the have-nots. Those who have the power and those who do not have the power. So Feuerbach therefore established that superstitious belief in religion is the cause of alienation. So our superstitious belief that God is somewhere else, that God has prescribed that these are the things to do and these are the things not to do, therefore these are the reasons that make human being alienated from himself, alienated from the idea of God itself. So therefore, I repeat again, Feuerbach says, religion is the disuniting of man from himself. So religion, as long as we believe in superstitious powers, therefore we are disuniting, or man is disuniting from himself. He is alienating himself from himself. So therefore, according to Feuerbach, what we call God in religion is nothing but the projected personality of man. Is the projected personality of man. So, what is God? God is man. What is God? God is man. The personality of God is nothing else but the projected personality of man. So if man is a good human being, therefore, or the best of man is actually God. The ideal nature of man is God. So therefore, in his own word, man is the real God. Man is the real God. God is not such a thing that exists beyond man. God is nothing that exists beyond man. Something that is beyond our imagination cannot be God. So therefore we cannot separate God from man, because separation of God from man is nothing but separation of man from man itself. So therefore the separation of God from man is therefore the separation of man from man, the unloosening of the social bond. This is what he said. Therefore you can say that he rightly says that God is nothing but the projected personality of man. And therefore the secret of all religion is nothing but man. Worship and devotion of God is just the expression of human emotion. And if therefore we think that God is something different from man, then man becomes separated from himself, and ultimately he becomes alienated. So therefore, while discussing the true nature of religion, Feuerbach in his book, The Essence of Christianity, he says this, I quote again, religion, at least the Christian, is the relationship of man to himself, or more correctly to his own nature, that is his subjective nature, but a relation to it viewed as nature apart from his own. The divine being is nothing else than the human being, or rather, the human nature purified, freed from the limits of individual man, made objective, that is, contemplated and revered as another, a distinct being. All the attributes of the divine nature are therefore attributes of human nature. So, if you think, something that is divine, if you think that something that is, or you think of something that is supernatural, actually those are attributes of human nature. So, therefore, religion does not mean projecting man to something which is external, but rather something which is internal. So, therefore, Feuerbach, he recognized as his own concept of religion to be very much similar to Spinoza's pantheism. And therefore, while Spinoza, he unites God with nature or material being, Feuerbach regards this pantheism to be theological atheism, and he unites, man to God or man to man. He says he unites the idea that God is nothing but man in his best attributes. So, basically, what Feuerbach tried to do in the essence of Christianity is that he tried to reveal that Christian theology and religious consciousness are nothing but the psychological and historical culmination of the self-alienation. The way, so what he's trying to say is that as long as we say that God is somewhere else, then we are alienating itself. So, therefore, Feuerbach's main attack on historical form of religion, where God has been conceived as different form of man, is actually the source of his critique of religion. And as I said, according to Feuerbach, God is nothing but the creation of man. We cannot differentiate God from human being. So, therefore, in religion, the human being projects his own essence on God, and therefore, according to Feuerbach, what we normally think of as divine being is nothing but human being. So therefore, the purpose of Feuerbach, therefore, is to prove that the existence or non-existence of man, and therefore, for him, yes, there is existence of God. The existence and non-existence of God, and for him, therefore, the existence of God is actually the existence of man. If God has to exist, he has to exist in human creation. While Hegel argues that man is the revealed form of God, Feuerbach argues just reverse that to it, that God is the revealed form of man. You see, and while Hegel proposition that man is the revealed God, this is transformed into Feuerbach's proposition that God is the revealed man. So therefore, what we can say in towards the end is that Feuerbach therefore emphasized upon human being, upon being itself, and he tried to establish that thought cannot come without being. So what is important for Feuerbach is the being or the existence of human being, and therefore, according to Feuerbach, in religion, man becomes as an estranged divine being, a dual personality. But man cannot understand that religion, and God has nothing but the creation of human beings. So God is nothing but the creation of human beings. Okay. Therefore, man in religion, man cannot realize his own true nature. He surrenders his own essence to something beyond him. Therefore, man's become alienated from his actual nature when he is influenced by the idea of religion. And according to Feuerbach, therefore, the emancipation of man, the liberation of man from religion is the only way to remove him from his own alienation. And therefore, God is nothing. We have to understand that God is nothing but man's own realized sense of man's own realization of his inner self. Okay, I will stop here. Thank you very much.